So, you want to work in a zoo? Well, you're in the right place. We're going to be talking to zookeepers, researchers, conservationists and many more people about their careers. We will discuss how they got into doing what they do now, and of course we'll be asking them for their advice to those that aspire to work with animals or for animals and the natural world.
Thanks, Ollie. For this episode, we're excited to welcome Steve Nash. In these careers podcasts, we wanted to chat to Steve as he has worked as a keeper and as a lecturer teaching future keepers, and now works with others to run our zoos here at Paignton and at Newquay. Now, many of us think we know what it takes to be a keeper, but now is our chance to find out from someone who has done the job and admits to being a zoo geek. Steve and I worked together at Chester Zoo 20 years ago, and surprisingly, he's still talking to me. And later in the podcast, we'll be asking Steve's advice on how to choose a college course for those interested in studying further. There are lots of different animal care and zoo courses, and Steve will hopefully be able to give us some useful pointers in making a choice. So, welcome, Steve.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we always start off the podcast, obviously, with you introducing yourself. Now, you are Steve. But Steve, who are you and what do you do at the moment at Paignton Zoo?
Okay, so
for Wild Planet Trust, I should say.
Quite. So my name's Steve Nash. I'm head of campaigns and programs for Wild Planet Trust. That doesn't really tell you much about what I actually do. So campaigns and programs is a department which includes a number of teams within the trust. Our education and engagement teams, our communications, our graphics and creative teams, as well as conservation, field projects, higher education and research. Mm-hmm. So it's quite a diverse mix of people, but it makes for a very exciting day. There's always interesting discussions going on and lots of kind of creative and innovative types wandering around, coming up with good ideas for things we can do tomorrow.
The other question that we ask at the start of these podcasts is, what is the weirdest job that you've ever had?
Oh, so I've had, I guess, dozens of jobs that would count as weird. And I think, as anybody that's done seasonal work on holiday from university will know, if you sign up for an agency, sometimes you just find yourself doing things you could never have expected. I think a couple of highlights. I worked for a very short period of time as a... So it makes me laugh just thinking about it because I am in no way the kind of person you would want to meet when you went into an undertaker's office.
Right.
But for a very short period of time, I was drafted in to provide administrative support in an undertaker's office.
Right.
And I lasted less than 2 hours.
Did you leave or were you pushed?
It was suggested that I didn't have the type of personality that was appropriate for that kind of setting. And various other kind of temporary things, working in warehouses, doing night shifts and things. But I think probably one of the strangest was I worked at a crisp flavour manufacturer.
Okay.
And I was in charge of basically making up orders for crisp flavourings. And it was amazing how many days cheese and onion flavouring lingers in your clothes.
Okay.
Because even after just 2 days of work, I still stank of crisps 2 weeks later.
So, crisp flavouring manufacturer.
Yeah, I think that was probably it. I mean, various other... And working with food is always kind of interesting because obviously there's various hygiene controls and things. But yeah, my kind of... After graduating, one of the short jobs I had was as a microbiologist.
Okay.
Working for a well-known department store in their food tech department, checking sandwich fillings and those kind of products. Which, yes, was just really interesting, the amount of work that goes into checking prawn mayo and butter and rocket. But it did mean that for the few months I was working there, I had the most amazing lunches on every day because I could dictate what samples I tested that day. And it invariably aligned to what I fancied for lunch.
And never cheese and onion?
No, not cheese and onion. Never eaten them since.
Right, getting back onto more serious topics here. Okay, which is that so you want to work in a zoo. We're focusing on careers that are around zoos and other conservation organisations. Okay, can you remember when you first decided that you wanted to work at a zoo? Was there an experience that stood out?
I guess there were a couple of standout moments all occurred at a similar time. and it kind of I always have to pause when I say this because it reminds me how quickly time passes and that I'm no longer 21. 1982 would be a defining year. Coincidentally, considering where I now work, I think that was also the year I first visited Paynton Zoo.
Right.
But it was also the year at which I got my first pet reptile. And Matt, as you mentioned earlier, I've kind of worked as a zookeeper, and I'm a self-confessed geek or nerd, whichever is your term of preference. But I've always, throughout all of that period, have been fascinated by reptiles and amphibians. And it was that being in a position, and I was 6 at the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're 6 years old, right?
6 years old. I had, to my parents' surprise, acquired a snake.
Right.
It was, long story short, it was my birthday. My parents knew the people who were in the pet shop. And they said, we're going to send Steve down so that he can have a pet for his birthday. Okay. I think she fully expected that I would come back with a guinea pig or a hamster. So when I turned up an hour later with a bag with a snake in it, I think that probably took her by surprise. But yeah, to my parents' eternal credit, they were hugely encouraging. That I did, over the years, I acquired this quite large collection of lizards and snakes and spiders and things. But I think it was that, and as a child who'd been really fascinated by dinosaurs, to have this living, breathing, incredible animal that I was looking after and responsible for, was a really defining thing, I think.
You remember what sort of snake it was?
It was a North American garter snake,
right, okay.
And she was called Gladys.
Okay, slightly stinky.
Okay. Yes, yeah, because garter snakes eat kind of fish and worms, and they produce voluminous and highly scented musk. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Do you think that was when you decided that you wanted to work in a zoo, or do you think it was just like sort of setting you on the pathway?
I think the two things happened very closely.
Yeah.
Because I rapidly went from having one garter snake to now I've got a lizard and some stick insects and here's a tarantula. And I think it was just I've always just kind of really enjoyed the technicalities of not just having an animal in a box, but making sure everything was provided for. And I've always been a bit of a book nerd, so being able to just sit and read and find out and apply knowledge to something practical, which obviously is really the essence of modern day zookeeping. You've got to be constantly on your game in terms of research and understanding the species you work with the aim that you want to provide the best possible life that you can. So I think that was something that came along very quickly.
Do you think that's something that, right, so especially when you chat to acrists and reptile keepers, right, they're often obsessed by like numbers, temperature, climate control, humidity, so it does seem to be sort of technical. Yeah,
and I think, looking after reptiles, amphibians, and as you say, fish and invertebrates, there is a lot more, I guess, precision.
Yeah.
You get it with other taxa as well, birds particularly, small mammals. But it is, I think, whether because you're kind of controlling so much more of their environment. Yeah. It's if you've got a typical mammal that's probably got outdoor access and it's exposed to the sun and the wind and the rain. Yeah. Whereas a reptile is typically kept in an enclosed system. So the responsibility kind of should, I think, weigh very heavily on you if you're going to look after an animal. Yeah. And whatever it is, whether it's an exotic animal in a zoo or a pet at home, you've got to go into it understanding that you're responsible for every choice that animal has is down to you. So I think that the responsibility of looking after it properly, and also just having these amazing animals and being able to watch them. Yeah,
and the joy of doing it well.
Yeah, yes, that's the thing. And when they grow and they breed, or I remember the first time I hatched out a gecko egg. I didn't shut up about it for weeks. It was the most amazing thing.
It shows that you've done what you need to do right as well. Yeah.
So, from those early experiences, when did you first work with animals? Actually, paid work.
So, paid work was, I guess, I was 16, which was in a garden centre, a local garden centre in the aquatics department. Working with tropical and freshwater marine fish. And then,
did you do volunteering as well or not?
I kind of volunteered at our local vets for many years, kind of after schools and weekends. There was a phase, I think, at which I thought zoo vet was something I would be keen to do, but actually it was the keeping them well so they didn't need fixing rather than the fixing that most took my interest, if that makes sense. And I think particularly with a lot of animals, a lot of the health issues that you see are because of how they've been kept. So by definition, if you keep them really well, they hopefully are less likely to require fixing in the end. So it was, rather than patching them up or medicating them when they're ill, it was keeping them away.
Keeping them properly, okay. That seems to be a common theme with a lot of the people that we've spoken to. So the zookeepers and other people, has been that they've often sought out experience, like tried to get opportunities. And it's not always been volunteering, but they've often just tried to get an opportunity to help with something, care for an animal, work at a different collection. So so you did do a bit of volunteering and then paid work.
Yeah, so I mean the kind of paid work, so that was weekend work while I was doing A-levels. But I think in relation to people looking to get into this field of work, I mean, working with animals is a privilege and it's a joy, and lots of people want to do it, which can make it quite difficult to gain that voluntary experience. And also, particularly if you're young, being able to get somewhere to volunteer might not be easy.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be the big animals, does it? It's not got to be it's not got to be a massive lion for you to get the experience of caring for, nurturing, and
no, I think it requires a certain type of character. You need certain attributes that make you want to be caring for. So same with nursing and with people. You've got to be of a certain mindset, I think.
Yeah.
But no, I mean the important thing is the understanding of what caring for an animal involves. That it isn't 9 till 5. It's often cold. It often smells. It's often especially with look at large mammals. Like if you're lucky enough to look after a horse or something, it can be backbreaking work in all weathers. So one of the things when you're looking at people with experience, it kind of gives you that confidence that actually they know what the reality of animal work is. Yeah, which isn't I'm just sat here stroking this amazing animal. I'm actually got to look after it. I'm cleaning up after it when it's made a mess. I'm preparing its food. It can sometimes can be antisocial hours. So the really valuable thing of experience is it shows people that you understand what you're letting yourself in for, which I think is really valuable. Okay. The other thing I would just say with experience, and kind of linked perhaps to the difficulty of getting direct animal experience, zoos, yes, they're full of animals, but zoos are about people coming to see those animals and finding out all about them. So actually experience working with the public is often just as valuable as experience working with animals. I've commonly heard people that, you said, have you got a job? They go, I just work in a shop. And he goes, no, take away the word just. Yeah. You work in the shop, which means you're able to deal with the public. And as anyone that's worked in retail or hospitality will know, that's a very diverse group of people. You have to behave professionally. You have to be responsible. You might have responsibility for cashing up or locking up. So actually, that just working in retail or hospitality shows you've got a huge range of skills that are hugely valuable. And Matt, as you'll know, part of our role is about engaging people with the work that we do. So being able to hold a conversation with someone you've only just met is incredibly useful. You get lots of people that are great with animals, but run away if a crowd turns up. Yeah,
we've got 500,000 people visiting each year to our 2 zoos, so there's quite a lot of people. Yeah,
so when we look at experience, animal experience, great as much as you can, but being comfortable in your own skin around people is massively important as well.
So, first job as a keeper. So how did you get started as a keeper?
So I guess my first zoo job was actually a voluntary post.
Okay.
And actually I was very fortunate when I was at university to meet a group of people who were planning to go out and work in a wildlife rescue centre in Cameroon, in West Africa. And Cameroon was somewhere I'd always wanted to go because I'm a bit of a disciple of Gerald Durrell.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of you may well be familiar with, famous author.
If you haven't read his books, make sure you do.
Yes, make sure you do. Yeah. Founded, Jersey Zoo, Durrell. And he was someone who had a quite strong influence on my early decisions around zookeeping as a career. But he very famously went on several expeditions to Cameroon. So the opportunity to actually go somewhere where he had been was really exciting. It's probably also worth pointing out, I was at university at the time, but I went to university at a time where it wasn't quite as expensive as it is nowadays. So
you went to Manchester, right?
Liverpool.
Liverpool, right.
Yes.
Okay, so Liverpool.
Yeah, don't ever go there and confuse the two.
Yeah, don't do that.
So you went to Liverpool studying what?
Zoology.
Oh, okay, so the classic, right.
Yeah, so I met up with, there's a group there that was set up as essentially as a university society.
Yeah.
Called the University of Liverpool Cameroon Wildlife Aid Group, which was
Like
set up to it's catchy, wag, which was set up to raise funds for it's still called the Limbe Wildlife Centre in Limbe in Cameroon. It was the opportunity to sort of, if you can pay your own way, come out for the summer. And as I say, thankfully, I thought that's what better way to spend a student loan than 10 weeks in Cameroon. So that was my first time working in a zoo.
Yeah.
Obviously, completely voluntary. And I guess it was also the first time that I'd flown, first time I'd left Europe. So as a culture shock, it was quite the summer.
Yeah, and this feeds into the thing about getting experience, like just going somewhere, taking the chance, going for it.
I think I've been a real strong believer. If you get a chance to step outside your comfort zone, do it. Okay, however uncomfortable it makes you feel.
Yeah,
because that's part of getting out of your comfort zone. Is it should unnerve you a bit. But for me, I mean, I was 19. As I said, I'd never set foot on a plane. I'd never left Europe, and I'm flying to West Africa with a few people that I'd only ever met whilst drunk, to go and work essentially in the jungle for 10 weeks.
Amazing.
But that again, it was one of the things, as well as again, the huge privilege of working with. It was mostly with primates and crocodiles. It was quite a diverse little collection, but also just working in one of these countries I'd previously only ever seen on telly or in a book.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's quite difficult sometimes with conservation is you tend to view conservation issues from your own circumstance.
Yeah.
And here in the UK, we are, I know things are difficult at the moment. I'm in no way belittling cost of living challenges. But in comparison to a lot of the world, we're still in a pretty privileged position in terms of our opportunities that we get. And I think to actually go to a country that was completely different, where people had different priorities and different views and different perspectives, and be really immersed in it. I mean, it was, I can't overstate how profound an experience that summer in Cameroon was. I mean, it utterly changed my view on a lot of things, partly because I nearly died. but also just, seeing other people's worldviews, which I really hadn't been exposed to.
We'll leave that story for another podcast, though. Okay, so when you went to Limbe and then you got the experience there, is that when you thought, right, okay, I'm going to try and work as a keeper again?
I think, and I think it really highlighted the fact that, conservation is something that happens all the time in different places. And, it kind of helped me to start formulating ideas of what zoos should be for.
Okay.
And, what role should they play? And when a zoo says they do conservation, what does that actually mean? Because, this gave me a chance to see what conservation was. And where I was based in Limbe, this was a rescue centre for bushmeat orphans, primates, etc. But also meant I saw deforestation for the first time. I saw the destruction of habitat. I saw palm oil plantations for the first time,
which can be quite
which is
emotionally
just hugely
disturbing.
And seeing, and even again in terms of how we look after our animals, I saw species there that I previously had only ever kept in a small vivarium, but then I saw them in the wild, and to see a lizard that you'd previously looked after in a metre square box, just running off 10 yards ahead of you, climbing up a tree and not even pausing for breath. It just really makes you see how amazing these animals are, because you see them in that context. And it kind of made me think, actually, we've got to do our best. If we're going to keep animals captive, we really have to do our very best by them and give them the opportunities to do all of these amazing behaviours. So that was really it really changed. I think every time I've been lucky enough to go abroad since then, seeing animals doing their thing in the wild is always a really important thing. And again, certainly something I'd recommend to anybody that wants to work in zoos. Watch wild animals. And that doesn't have to be to go to Central Africa or Australia. No. It can be in your local park. Yeah. And just to see birds doing their thing
find
all
a
around
wetland,
you,
go and see some
and just to see
migrating fowl or something, it's always quite amazing to see.
Yeah, just to see nature doing its thing is really quite profound.
So Steve, we've got your sort of early voluntary keeping experience in Cameroon, but so when you came back to the UK, how did you get a job? What was your first?
So
you finished uni?
Yeah, I finished university. So I graduated, spent probably 6 months just paying off my overdraft, which I mentioned earlier, working for a microbiology lab, filling myself up on other people's sandwiches. And then what did I do? Then, yes, I basically just started applying for trainee zookeeper jobs.
Right, okay.
At the time, there was a couple of publications that came out every week where zoo ads tended to be placed. Yeah. Because this is certainly didn't have internet access at that point.
Now we would be saying to people to look on the
website.
Just
go to the BIASA website and off you go.
British and Irish Association of Zoos and Aquaria. Yes, so that's the big one, BIASA.
Yeah, the careers page on there is really useful.
So now we'd be saying that or environment job or something else. But
so it took a bit longer, and then just handwritten letter of application, printed off a CV, posted it off, and you wait for the reply. And then I was lucky enough to get. Are we naming? Places? Yeah. Okay, so my first trainee keeper job was at Banham Zoo, which is in Norfolk.
What were you caring for?
It was a mix of species, so primarily mammals initially. I guess like a lot of trainee keepers, you tend to start off on the more amenable species. So the livestock in the farm, small carnivores, otters, binturongs, those kind of bits. Then a bit of cover keeping, and then it became apparent that I was very interested in reptiles. So I kind of started to take over the running of the small reptile house that Banham had at the time. Okay.
So your early experience looking after reptiles was then, having worked with other animals, you ended up going towards that as a speciality.
Yeah, so this was, I had, throughout the years, had kept and looked after countless, reptiles, amphibians, invertebrates at home as a private hobbyist. But Banham was the first place where actually these animals are on public display and they're your responsibility. And from there, actually, I moved up to Chester.
That's where I first met you, in Chester, and you were working as a reptile keeper. So how did you decide that you wanted to be a reptile keeper? Was it just that was the part of the day that you enjoyed, or it was just the animals that had appealed to you, or what?
I think primarily it was because I'd always wanted to be a reptile keeper. Banham Zoo was a fantastic experience and a fantastic place to kind of get your foot in the door and really understand what zookeeping is all about. Yeah. Working with such a diverse array of species was really instrumental again. And I guess finalising actually, yes, I'd like to specialise. The specialist role that came up at Chester was pretty perfect.
At the time, full-on collection of venomous snakes.
Yes, so again, it was for me, as someone who had a lifetime of interest in reptiles, to get there and to for venomous snakes and huge alligators, tuatara. We were there when their first Komodo dragon arrived, which at the time was the first Komodo dragon that had been seen in the UK for decades. Yeah, it was. It just blew my mind every single day. Working with these amazing animals. Yeah,
new exhibits.
New exhibits. Been looking at how do you design exhibits, and I think throughout all of this, there was this growing realization of the importance of people in conservation, and I'd always been focused on, rightly, on the animals and making sure they had everything they need. But there was also that growing realization, alongside going overseas and seeing what was happening to nature in the field. It was that real understanding that actually conservation is about how people value nature and how they perceive it and whether they think it's worth saving. So as great as it was that I was looking after these incredible animals and we were having some great breeding success, actually reptiles are animals with a bit of a negative public image.
Yeah.
So actually, the key thing for them and for a lot of animals is we need people to think they're amazing, because if people don't think they're amazing, they're not going to be that inclined to look after them or to worry if they're not there. So it was that growing realization of how important people are for conservation, and therefore how important zoos are for conservation, because they expose people to animals that they would otherwise not have been fortunate enough to see. And whether that was through the talks at Chester that you were involved with, or developing exhibits that allowed people to get really up close to them.
I think zoos got a really valuable role there, because people would say, well, you can see a Komodo on TV, but actually when you see them in the flesh and you see them move, and you realise maybe how big, or maybe they're not as big as you thought they were, but the way they move, it may be more threatening or more interesting. It's actually connecting with that animal and realising that is a Komodo dragon.
Yeah, and I think it's that to many, I guess in many cases, it's the uniqueness of zoos, is that it's a multi-sensory. You're not just going to look, you're going to hear and smell, and it can be all consuming. I often use here the example with giraffe. I mean, giraffe, when you think about them, they're the most ridiculous and preposterous of animals. You couldn't make them up. But it doesn't matter how many times you've watched a film about a giraffe or read a book about a giraffe, until you've actually stood there, and looked, you don't know what a giraffe is until you've really seen one in the flesh. And for the vast majority of people, the time that they're going to see a giraffe is at a zoo.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us a huge responsibility, because we're facilitating that first time.
Yeah.
On any given day, people are seeing these things for the first time, and I think it's really impactful.
Yeah, the magic of seeing a giraffe close enough that you can see them flutter their eyelashes.
Yeah.
So after I first knew you at Chester, you were a reptile keeper there. How long were you a keeper for? Total?
2.5 years at Chester.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, kind of personal circumstances caused me to move to Hampshire.
Okay.
Where I took up a role in a land-based college, the Sparsholt College.
Yeah, okay. So Sparsholt was quite a big, at the time, agricultural college, like with other courses that ran alongside.
So I guess most counties have a land-based college, which traditionally would have been called an agricultural college.
Yeah.
So doing agriculture, countryside services, those kind of programs. But increasingly, certainly over the last 2 decades, animal care, animal studies have become a real key area of their provision. Most of them also have an animal centre where students on their courses can experience looking after a selection of animals. And Sparsholt, I guess, is probably one of the better known colleges in the UK because of the size and scope of the animal house and animal centre that it has. And actually, Sparsholt is a BIASA member. It has a zoo licence. It has a whole host of incredible species, hornbills and red pandas. And
so they're actually displaying to the public on open days.
They open on open days, but ultimately they're there to show people how to look after this huge diversity of species. So when we mentioned earlier about getting experience, were you to go to one of these kind of providers, you would get hands-on experience of actually what you need to do to look after these animals well. So I moved to Sparsholt initially as a animal centre technician to help students understand how to look after them.
Okay.
But it quickly became apparent, I guess, because I'd had experience in the zoo industry and was more than happy to stand up in front of people and just talk. I kind of quickly found myself in a lecture theatre classroom setting. Although actually after 2 years of working at Sparsholt, I actually took a gap year.
Yeah.
I went to Australia and Southeast Asia for a year.
Nice.
I kind of had itchy feet. But then, I kind of came back and took on a similar role again at Sparsholt, which then developed into the role that I spent most of my time. I was at Sparsholt 16 and a half years in total. But I kind of fell into teaching in a more formal capacity rather than just doing practical husbandry and instruction. It was formal teaching. And that led to a focus primarily on higher education provision, so looking after foundation degrees and degree programs. All of this time, I think it's worth mentioning, I was always involved with other zoos. So I view my Sparsholt years as I was working with zoos. And even though it was, had a zoo license and was a BIASA member, but I was, part of BIASA working groups and committees was regularly going to other zoos. Sparsholt still runs a course called the DIMSA, the Diploma in the Management of Zoo and Aquarium Animals, and it had a predecessor called the ANCMZA. So I was involved in facilitating some of that. So I was training zookeepers who were working in collections, as well as training students who wanted to work in zoos.
This podcast is brought to you by Wild Planet Trust, a conservation charity based in the southwest of the UK with zoos in Paignton and Newquay, local and national nature reserves, and field projects in the UK, Tanzania, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Vietnam, and Sulawesi. You can find out more on our website www.wildplanettrust.org.uk.
Because when we were wanting to talk to you, you worked as a keeper and then doing the sort of animal care technician, working your way up and then starting to teach. But ultimately you ended up at Sparsholt helping to train zookeepers or the future zookeepers. So one of the things is how would people tell a good course apart from other courses? This isn't to advertise Sparsholt, but if you're somebody who's interested in working at a zoo, how are you going to know which course is for you? Are there some simple ways you can tell apart?
It can be quite difficult. I mean, I would say there is a huge number of people that choose to go and study animal care or variations of animal welfare, animal science, a range of programs, or animal management. You always need to go into this on the understanding that jobs in zoos are very competitive. So I'd hate for anyone to think that if they got a qualification, that automatically means that they're going to walk into a job. There's lots of colleges and lots of students graduate from them. I think it is really, really important that if you work with animals, you really understand the science behind it, the theory behind it, and can apply it. And a good college should be able to show you how to apply current knowledge in a practical setting. So you want to look at the opportunities that they provide for doing that, and often that is because they have an animal centre or a farm or whatever on their site. It's also worth looking at finding out what staff are teaching on the course. And again, one of the things I certainly found was really useful when I was teaching was that not only had I worked as a zookeeper, so I could kind of give my own anecdotes, my own experience, but I was also actively involved in zoo research and on working groups and other subcommittees. So I was regularly going to zoos, talking to zoo people, and could see what was going on. And I think because our understanding of animal welfare and behaviour and conservation is rapidly developing, you've got to be at the forefront of knowledge and change.
So if you're interested in a course, a little bit of Googling around the course and the people who are teaching on the course, maybe the lead on that would be worthwhile. But also if you went to an open day and you chatted to them, you could find out whether they're up to date on research about that sort of welfare and care for those animals.
And I think there are, there's some fantastic people that work especially in the UK, lots of colleges, lots of staff doing really great research on welfare and behaviour, which we're using practically to improve husbandry in the zoo. But certainly do go there, do have a look around, do speak to people. For higher education courses, there are various kind of accreditation frameworks, obviously for college. There's Ofsted as well, so there are independent means of where they've evaluated the provision of a course, how much support do you get from your tutor, those kind of things. I know so I did my degree, as I said, I did zoology at the University of
doesn't
Liverpool.
equip you to work in a zoo.
No, by no means. Zoology is the science of studying animals, not the practicalities of cleaning up after them. And I know certainly for my first year, as is often the case in large universities, you'll be in a first year in a common unit, and you'll go into a lecture theatre, and there's 200 other people. And actually, the likelihood of you being able to discuss concerns with your lecturer or your tutor is quite slim. And one of the things that a lot of colleges have, which is much beneficial, is there are far fewer students per staff member. So, you want to take full use of your tutor's experience and expertise. And again, we kind of alluded to earlier the fact that conservation is about people as well as animals. You will get, when you're at college, lots of opportunities to do other things. So there will be some courses you do or some modules which don't immediately stand out as being immediately animally, but are really important nonetheless. I think things like public speaking, being able to create an online portfolio, all of how do you properly structure a bibliography and a reference list, which for a lot of people is the bane of their academic life, is the formatting. But actually what that demonstrates, certainly to me as someone looking at potential job applicants, is okay, this is someone with an eye for detail that cares about appearance and professionalism and how they're perceived. And being able to stand up, or group work is another one. Lots of people don't like doing group work, but actually in life and in work, you don't generally get to choose who you work with. So to be able to show that I've worked with people that I didn't necessarily choose, but I've still produced a banging piece of work. It's fantastic. So it's about taking full advantage of the opportunities. And one of the other things that becomes really clear, I think just with age, it's not in any way linked to this industry, is but sometimes opportunities appear from nowhere. You can go in with a specific focus to do a certain thing, but then there'll be something shiny out the corner of your eye on the periphery that you hadn't thought about. And then you suddenly just say, this is a brand new passion or a new opportunity or a chance to do something else. So it's just being open to...
Field course, or somebody needs help with setting something up or something like that. I was going to say, so your degree was in zoology.
Yes.
So do you hold a qualification in keeping or not?
So qualification-wise, I've got my honours degree in zoology. I've got keeping-wise, I've got the predecessor of the predecessor to the DIMSA,
right? Okay,
which is National Extension College course in zookeeping.
Okay,
which was a correspondence course.
And you had to do that basically when you were learning as a trainee keeper.
Yes, that allowed me to become a qualified keeper. And variations of that exist today.
That's quite normal, right? To do a bit of learning on the job.
Yes,
and especially with distance learning now. So
yes, There's various options and apprenticeships and things. But obviously, because I spent a considerable amount of time in education, I've also got teaching qualifications. I've got a PGCE, and actually my master's degree, which again I did whilst working. I always thought after I graduated with my honours degree, my first degree, that I would like to go on and do further study. But at the time, I wasn't really sure what. So I left it. Probably 12 years before deciding.
Okay.
And actually my MSc was on recreational learning and interpretation. Essentially it was how do we engage people with complex topics, which came about as a result of this growing awareness that actually involving people with conservation is really key. So I think I may as well do a master's in it and really get to grips with it.
Do you want to study more?
I think you've got to study every day. I think not necessarily just formal qualifications, but I think I will never refuse an opportunity to read a book.
There's always questions to be asked and things to be learned.
And I think again, especially with conservation and animal management, our knowledge has advanced so rapidly that if we looked after animals now the way we were told to 15 years ago, it wouldn't cut the mustard. No. Because we know more and we can do better. So part of everyone, I think, if you work with any career really, you've got to keep up to date, and our knowledge is moving pretty quick. So constantly learning, always buy that book, always have a read.
Would you do a different qualification if you were starting out now?
I don't think I would. I mean, I made my initial decisions based on what was available at the time. So I did GCSEs and A-levels. I did 4 A-levels and science-based primarily. And I went to university, which at the time was quite a traditional route. Nowadays, I think there's probably a mix between people that do A-levels and people that go down more of the diploma, the more vocational route rather than the more academic A-level route. They generally then come back and converge for foundation degrees and honours degrees, and people dip out at different times. And I think there's an ongoing discussion certainly with zookeepers as what's more important, qualifications or experience. And the simple answer is both. This is not a binary choice. You can have someone who has no qualifications, and actually the best zookeeper I've ever known had no academic qualifications.
Yeah.
But the care they provided to their animals was second to none.
Yeah.
Equally, I know people who have countless qualifications who are phenomenal with a broom and can dice a carrot in 30 seconds. So it's not an either or. And I would say increasingly, because of the level of competitiveness for these roles and the range of institutions that are providing courses, there are now lots and lots of people that have qualifications and experience, and that's really key. I think that there's some phenomenally talented people that work in this industry, and there are some phenomenally talented people who are yet to enter the industry and are just looking for that opportunity.
Yeah, I think it was very clear during our chat with the keepers in one of the earlier episodes that the perception of it just being that you're sweeping up poop is just wrong, and that the technical level, the way that the keepers used Microsoft Excel and maths in their work every day, it was quite interesting to see, and even down to using just IT. Nowadays, the keepers were chatting about having Google Alerts set up for research articles
Google
on
Scholar
giraffes,
Alerts,
and you think, right, okay, that's just a very different. If somebody was saying to you, "Oh, really? Do you want to be a zookeeper?" It's just going to be shoveling poo, and then actually the reality is very different. I mean, I know everybody knows there is going to be a certain amount of just clearing up, but there's a lot of technical knowledge that's needed.
Yeah.
So for you, changing tack a little bit, which is that you're not keeping animals now. You're trying to persuade people to be interested in animals and in conservation. So what does a day look like? What's on your desk at the moment?
Nothing, because I'm very efficient and everything is done.
We know that's not true.
No. I mean, my days vary. I think a typical day would be difficult to define. I think things at the moment we're looking at, there's opportunities for new developments and new exhibits here at the zoo. I've got the final proofs for a new guidebook. I've got some research applications for people that want to come and do behavioural research here at the zoo.
But new developments being potentially moving animals.
Yeah, so kind of animal moves, new exhibits, new builds, new plans, and also all of the seemingly quite random requests that come with just looking after a team of people. Because I guess one of the things you find as you become a bit more senior, you move away from the doing and more towards helping other people do the do. So it's dealing with specific requests that people in my team need so they can do their job. So sometimes you find yourself running around trying to get stuff done just so someone else can get on and do their work. Yeah. But all the time, I mean, as anyone knows, if you work in a zoo, if you step outside at any given moment, you can be accosted by a visitor with a question about a
gibbon,
a gibbon or an ice cream or whatever. Yeah.
So, what do you like best about your job at the moment?
Oh, that's a simple question, but a difficult one, isn't it? I like what this is. Don't take this the wrong way. I quite like watching people, but in the sense of watching people enjoy the zoo and seeing them. And we mentioned earlier this idea that on any given day someone comes in and sees something for the first time ever, and you see it every day, and you hear people that potentially question why we have zoos, the ethics of zoos, which is zoos are a polarizing topic for some people. And it's without question there are some terrible zoos in the world that should be shut, but there are also some zoos that do phenomenal work and just provide these windows for people to. I think humans are inherently curious and enthralled by nature. So to come in and see people, just catch a moment.
Yeah.
Okay,
so it's just those just windows into people getting a moment of enlightenment or a privileged moment where they've sort of felt connected.
And I think especially given what's happened the last couple of years with COVID and lockdowns, I think people are much more appreciative of nature and green space and the environment. So, just seeing people engaged in a really positive way with the amazing animals and plants that we have, but also, just having the privilege of working with a group of people that, without question, every single person that I work with wants to make things better. And that's actually a really positive and uplifting workplace.
Yeah.
It's, I don't think there's many people that can say, on any given day, you will feel uplifted by other people's innovation and ideas and enthusiasm, and then you can turn around and there's a giraffe.
Yeah.
so
very different from an undertakers.
Yes.
Ultimately,
yeah.
people do generally want to come to the zoo and they want to have a good time. So they're, an audience who really are wanting to enjoy themselves, and that does mean that talking about animals and trying to convince people to care for nature. Here,
and I think even when sometimes you'll especially in the winter, you come in and it's dark, and you sit in an office, and you go home and it's dark, and you can sometimes forget that actually I'm in the middle of an 80-acre zoo with 2,500 animals from all over the world.
Yeah.
And then just to go for a walk, and actually there's a rhinoceros scratching his bum, or there's some leafcutter ants, or there's a crocodile having a yawn, and it's I find it really grounding, and it's just a really inspiring place to work, and to know that we have this greater purpose. And again, regardless of what people may or may not think about keeping animals in captivity, I'm completely happy that we're doing it for the right reasons, because we're using these animals to really help people understand why they matter. And I think that's a really valuable thing.
And if you're going to do it, try and do it well.
To
the best of your ability. That's all very positive, but what tasks are you happiest to leave to your teammates?
I guess my first answer is I'm quite privileged in that I really genuinely do like all aspects of my job, and I think that I can't think of anything I have to do that I wouldn't willingly do. But I think if I look at kind of my career over more years, so going back beyond my current role, certainly getting up early in the winter and cleaning up a paddock when it's sleeting, and you've got to carry a bale of straw from one end to the other, and you're slipping over in a pile of poo. But then equally, that's one of those moments of zookeeping that is more than compensated for by all of the many other positive aspects.
Okay, so tipping ice out of a bowl.
Trying to unblock a plug in a frozen water trough. But it's all part of what makes us who we are, isn't it? So,
I don't work with animals, so I'm engagement. But a lot of people think that we just cuddle animals all day. So what sacrifices are there? So for example, with the keepers, it's quite a physically demanding work. But what other sacrifices do you think of?
Well, I think some of it is. I don't think people would necessarily view them as sacrifices. I think it's looking after animals generally is something you go into because you love it. You certainly don't go in it to get rich. You do have to compromise, I suppose, in terms of socialising, because it isn't 9 till 5. Sometimes you will have to stay several hours late or come in several hours early. It can be quite emotionally draining. You're looking after animals, and even though we don't encourage close contact, you still have close bonds. And some of these animals, they get ill and they die. Or they get moved to another zoo. Yeah. So it can be quite a challenging job, because you're invested in this animal and looking after it, and sometimes the animal goes for whatever reason, or can interfere with your plans for the evening, or means you have to work on bank holidays and Christmas or whatever. But all of those things, I would say, are more than amply compensated just by the privilege of being able to work in close proximity with these animals. So,
what's your personal favourite animal to work with? Have you still got a passion project? Like, do you still keep stuff at home?
We have a few animals that live with us at home. We have a tendency to kind of unwanted and rescue animals.
Okay.
So a couple of tortoises and a few lizards and things. I guess favourite animal here at the zoo.
It's his ring-tailed lemurs for me. Here at the zoo, straight away, all the animals that I've cared for, like reptiles and things over the year, but it's ring-tailed lemur that just gets zoologically conservation-wise, they're interesting and they're charismatic.
Oh, okay, no, I can see that. I think probably my favourite, I suspect, if I had one, is a thing called the electric blue day gecko, which is a species that we look after here at Paynton, highly endangered in the wild. But this tiny, 3-4 inch fluorescent blue gecko. Again, it looks like it was coloured in the dark by a child, but it's this real amazing thing.
It does not look like a natural.
No, it looks like it shouldn't be natural, but it is. But then, on any given day, I will always stop and watch a peacock, because I think although they're free range here at the zoo, and they're something you walk by every day. But actually, when you look at them, it's just they have every colour you can think of.
Yeah.
On them, their display is phenomenal.
And very, very fluffy bottoms.
Yeah, they do have.
Do you find as well that as you walk past them and whatnot, you talk to them in the mornings and the evenings?
Oh, I always say hello.
Yeah. Say hello.
Or good evening.
Yeah.
Right, if you weren't working in conservation,
not just me,
do you think you would be?
I would be working in a bookshop.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and actually there was a point shortly before I started working at the college where I had 2 job offers on the table.
Mm-hmm.
One was the college and one was assistant manager of the local bookshop.
Okay.
And it was a decision I literally made with a coin.
Oh wow. Okay.
So yeah, I would happily sit and I know people that work in bookshops that just sit and read books all day. Anyway, and undermining what they do. But no, working in a bookstore or library would be ace. Yeah.
Okay, most important question: advice for your 15-year-old self.
Okay, so I kind of, this will sound like I've pre-planned it, and I have, because this is a line that I typically use if I've been asked this kind of question before. And it's quite simply, it's read the book, take the trip, say hello, and be nice.
Okay.
So,
fair enough.
We kind of mentioned most of these things.
Yeah.
Any opportunity to travel and see things from a different perspective, and to stress that doesn't mean long haul flights to Africa. That can be local. Just to see things from other perspectives. Keep up to date with what's going on. It doesn't have to be a book. It can be a podcast or any of the source of information that helps you to keep up to speed and to take different opinions on things. So always look at the opinion contrary to what yours is. I think a lot of the challenges we're facing in the world is because people are either or.
Yeah.
Actually, there's probably a more amenable middle ground, which only comes when you take the time to look at both sides. Say hello. I think you've got conservation needs communicators. So we need people that can engage more people, because the more people we have making the right decisions, the more change we can make.
Mm-hmm. And you said the other day as well about if you see somebody with a job you like talk to them, ask them how they got it. Just chat to them, because I think when you're looking at choosing careers, then often the only people who are talking to you are teachers or careers advisors. And actually, if you just go and have a chat to somebody, a friend of a friend who does the job you're interested in, and just say, is it really like that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I will always say yes to an opportunity to talk about myself. But I think the thing is, if you're your ideas about what you want to do in the future will change as you grow, because our opinions change as we grow. Mm-hmm. But if you see someone doing a job that you think, actually, that looks quite fun, and its jobs should be fun. Okay, we spend a lot of our time, a lot of our life working. So if you can find something that you enjoy, then work isn't work. But just ask. Don't be put off by the letters after their name or the title or the job role. Everybody that you see will have been in your position at some point. And if you want to ask, ask.
And if somebody's serious about their job and looking like they're busy, it's quite often because they're into their job and
they
wanted to be there.
Yeah. And then the other bit, just be nice. We've the last couple of years especially have been pretty grim.
Yeah.
Everyone has been through a lot, and you never know what other people are dealing with. But I kind of work on the basis that most people will want to do the right thing if they can. And if they make a mistake, it's because it was a mistake rather than an intentional attempt to stuff up your day. So just, be nice, be helpful, do your best. And I think, you'll be working with people, and you'll be spending time working with those people. So that time needs to be time well spent and pleasant, productive time. which kind of comes from being sociable and amenable and friendly and things.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Steve, for your time and for your contributions.
Thank you so much for listening or watching our podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving us a review, or if you're watching, please hit the like button and leave us a comment about your favourite part of the episode. To get more content from Wild Planet Trust, please consider checking out our YouTube channel. You can subscribe there, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter on our website. Of course, you can find Wild Planet Trust, Paynton Zoo and Newquay Zoo on all main social media platforms, and we'd really appreciate you checking those out as well. All that's left to say is thank you very much for watching, and of course we'll see you in the next episode.